My brother took credit for my work until the boss asked questions. Hi everyone. Before we get into today's video, I need your help. We've noticed that the channel's reach has been dropping a bit, and one of the best ways you can support us is by subscribing. It's quick, free, and helps us keep bringing you new and interesting stories. Your support means the world to us, and together we can grow this channel. Thank you so much. Now let's get to today's story. I'm writing from a temporary account for obvious reasons, and I've changed some details to protect my anonymity. I never thought my own brother would betray me. Not like this. Not when it mattered most. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start from the beginning, when everything seemed normal, when I still believed that family meant something more than competition. My name is Alex, and I work at Dataflow Solutions, a mid-sized tech consulting firm in downtown Chicago. I've been there for 3 years, quietly building a reputation as someone who gets things done. I'm not the loudest person in meetings. I don't schmooze with management at office happy hours, and I certainly don't claim credit that isn't mine. I let my work speak for itself. My brother Marcus joined the company 8 months ago. Same last name, same family background, but we couldn't be more different. Where I'm methodical and detail-oriented, Marcus is charismatic and persuasive. Where I prefer to work behind the scenes, Marcus naturally commands attention in any room he enters. Growing up, he was always the golden child, the one who could talk his way out of trouble, who made friends effortlessly, who seemed to succeed without really trying. I thought having him at the same company would be nice. Family support, you know. Someone to grab lunch with, someone who understood the unique pressures of our industry. I was naive. The project that changed everything started in November. Our biggest client, Morrison Industries, was hemorrhaging money due to inefficient data management across their supply chain. They needed a complete overhaul of their inventory tracking system, something that could integrate with their existing ERP software while providing real-time analytics and predictive modeling capabilities. It was the kind of project that could make or break careers. Success would mean a multi-million-dollar contract renewal and likely put whoever led it on the fast track for promotion. Failure would mean losing our biggest client and probably downsizing the team. Our department head, Janet Morrison, no relation to the client, just an unfortunate coincidence that Marcus loved to joke about, assigned the project to our team. There were 5 of us: myself, Marcus, Sarah Chen from Business Analysis, Tom Rodriguez from Systems Architecture, and Lisa Park from Project Management. From the first planning meeting, I knew this project was going to consume my life. The technical challenges were immense. Morrison Industries had been operating with a patchwork of legacy systems for over 20 years. Some of their inventory data was still stored in Excel spreadsheets that different departments updated manually. Other information lived in 3 separate databases that didn't communicate with each other. The whole thing was a mess that would require not just technical expertise, but creative problem-solving and an almost obsessive attention to detail. I thrived on that kind of challenge. While the others focused on their specific areas, Sarah on requirements gathering, Tom on system architecture, Lisa on timelines and resource allocation, I dove deep into the data integration problem. I spent evenings and weekends mapping out their existing data flows, identifying redundancies and gaps, and designing a unified schema that could accommodate their complex business processes. Marcus, meanwhile, seemed to approach the project with his usual casual confidence. He attended meetings, contributed to discussions, and always seemed to know just the right thing to say. But when it came to the actual technical work, I noticed he often deferred to others or spoke in generalities. Alex has been doing some great work on the data mapping, he'd say during our weekly check-ins. I've been focusing more on the strategic implications and client relationship management. Which was true, to an extent. Marcus did have a way with clients that I envied. When we presented updates to Morrison's executive team, he could explain complex technical concepts in terms that made business sense. He made them feel confident that we understood their needs and could deliver results. But I was doing the heavy lifting. The real work. The innovation. The breakthrough came in late December, during one of those quiet weeks between Christmas and New Year's when the office was nearly empty. I'd been wrestling with a particular problem for weeks. How to maintain data integrity during the migration process while minimizing downtime for Morrison's operations. Their business couldn't stop for our implementation. They had suppliers expecting payments, customers placing orders, warehouses shipping products. Any significant disruption to their data systems would cost them thousands of dollars per hour. I was sitting in my cubicle at 11 p.m. on December 28th, surrounded by empty coffee cups and crumpled sheets of paper covered in diagrams, when the solution finally came to me. It was elegant in its simplicity, a staged migration process that would create temporary data bridges between the old and new systems, allowing for real-time validation and rollback capabilities. I spent the next 3 days building a proof of concept, testing it against sample datasets, and documenting every aspect of the implementation. By the time the office reopened after the holiday, I had a complete technical specification that would solve Morrison's most critical challenge. I was exhausted but exhilarated. This was the kind of work I lived for, taking an impossible problem and finding a solution that nobody else had thought of. Marcus was one of the first people back in the office on January 3rd. He stopped by my cubicle while I was putting the finishing touches on my documentation. "How was your break?" he asked, leaning against my desk partition. "Good, productive. I think I've solved the migration problem." His eyebrows rose. "Really? The one we've been stuck on since November?" I nodded, unable to hide my excitement. "Want to see?" For the next hour, I walked him through my solution. I showed him the data flow diagrams, explained the staged migration process, demonstrated the proof of concept, and outlined the implementation timeline. Marcus asked good questions. He's not stupid, just lazy, and seemed genuinely impressed. "This is brilliant, Alex, really brilliant. Morrison's going to love this." I felt a warm glow of satisfaction. Recognition from Marcus meant something to me. Despite our differences, despite the way he'd always overshadowed me growing up, he was still my brother. His approval still mattered. "We should present this to Janet first thing Monday," I said. "Absolutely. This could be the key to the whole project." That weekend, I refined my presentation. I created clean slides explaining the technical approach, built interactive demos showing how the migration would work, and prepared detailed answers to every question I could anticipate. I wanted everything to be perfect. Monday morning, I arrived at the office early, my presentation materials ready. I'd scheduled a meeting with Janet for 10 a.m. to walk her through the solution. Marcus was supposed to join us. After all, we were a team, and he'd been working on the client relationship aspects while I focused on the technical implementation. At 9:45, I made my way to Janet's office, laptop bag in hand, ready to share what I genuinely believed was the breakthrough our project needed. Janet's door was closed, but I could hear voices inside. I knocked softly. "Come in," Janet called. I opened the door and froze. Marcus was already there, sitting across from Janet's desk, my diagrams spread out between them. He looked up as I entered, and for just a moment I saw something flicker across his face. Guilt, maybe, or calculation. "Alex," Janet said with a smile. "Perfect timing. Marcus was just showing me his solution to the Morrison migration problem. It's really impressive work." His solution. The words hit me like a physical blow. I stood in the doorway, my laptop bag suddenly feeling impossibly heavy, watching my brother gesture at my diagrams while explaining my solution to our boss. The key insight, Marcus was saying, was realizing that we needed to think about this as a gradual transition rather than a hard cutover. By creating these data bridges between the systems, we can validate everything in real time and maintain full operational continuity. He was using my exact words. The phrases I'd coined during those late nights of problem-solving, the terminology I'd developed to describe the technical processes. He spoke with confidence and authority, as if he'd spent weeks developing these ideas himself. "Marcus, this is exceptional thinking," Janet said. "The client is going to be thrilled. This addresses their biggest concern about the project." I cleared my throat. "Actually, Janet, Oh, Alex," Marcus interrupted smoothly. "I was just telling Janet how helpful your input has been on this. The collaboration between us really paid off." Collaboration. As if we'd worked on this together. As if he'd contributed anything beyond asking questions while I explained my work to him. "I've been thinking about this problem for weeks," I said carefully, trying to keep my voice steady. "I actually developed this solution over the holiday break." "That's right," Marcus nodded. And when you shared your initial thoughts with me, I was able to refine them and develop them into a comprehensive implementation strategy. He was so smooth, so convincing. The way he said it made it sound like I'd brought him some rough ideas that he'd then transformed into the polished solution now spread across Janet's desk. Janet looked between us, and I could see her trying to piece together the dynamic. Well, regardless of how it came together, this is exactly what we needed. Marcus, I'd like you to present this to the Morrison executives on Thursday. This could be the turning point for the entire project. I'd be happy to, Marcus said. Though I'll definitely want Alex there for the technical deep dive portions. How generous of him. I could be there to answer the hard questions while he took credit for the breakthrough. I mumbled something about needing to get back to my desk and left Janet's office in a daze. The rest of the day passed in a blur of anger, disbelief, and self-doubt. Had I somehow misunderstood the situation? Had Marcus actually contributed more to the solution than I remembered? But no. I had the timestamps on my files, the emails I'd sent to myself with ideas and iterations, the proof of concept code with my name in the comments. The work was mine. The breakthrough was mine. And my brother had stolen it. That evening, I confronted him in the parking garage. What the hell was that this morning? Marcus didn't even pretend not to know what I was talking about. Look, Alex, I know you're upset. Upset? Marcus, you took my work and presented it as your own. That's not collaboration, that's theft. He sighed and leaned against his BMW, a car that suddenly seemed to symbolize everything wrong with our relationship. You don't understand how this business works. It's not just about having good ideas. It's about presentation, about building confidence with leadership, about positioning yourself for success. By lying? I'm not lying. I'm contextualizing. You had the technical breakthrough, sure, but I'm the one who understands how to sell it, how to make it meaningful for the client and for Janet. That's valuable too. Then why not present it together? Why make it sound like you came up with the solution? Marcus was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke again, his voice was softer, almost apologetic. Because that's not how advancement works in companies like this. They need to see individual leadership, not collaborative effort. If we both claim credit, neither of us gets the recognition. But if one of us takes the lead and succeeds, it benefits both of us in the long run. How does it benefit me to watch you get promoted based on my work? Because I'll remember who helped me get there. And when I'm in a position to make decisions about the team, about project assignments, about recommendations for advancement, I'll take care of you. It was a seductive argument, I had to admit. Marcus had always been better at navigating office politics, at understanding the unwritten rules of corporate success. Maybe he was right. Maybe this was just how the game was played, but it still felt like betrayal. The Morrison presentation was scheduled for Thursday afternoon. I spent Tuesday and Wednesday helping Marcus prepare, going over technical details, anticipating questions, making sure he understood every aspect of the solution well enough to present it convincingly. He was a quick study, I'll give him that. By Thursday morning, he could explain the data flow diagrams, describe the implementation timeline, and even handle most of the technical questions that might come up. You're ready? I told him, as we reviewed the presentation one final time. We're ready, he corrected. I couldn't have done this without you. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe that this was temporary, that once the project succeeded and Marcus got his recognition, he'd make sure I got mine too. The Morrison executives arrived at 2 p.m. CEO Patricia Morrison, CTO David Park, and Operations Director Rebecca Stone. These were serious people who didn't have time for mediocrity. Their company's future depended on getting this data migration right. Marcus was in his element from the moment they walked into the conference room. He shook hands confidently, made small talk about the weather and their drive downtown, and smoothly transitioned into the presentation. The challenge you've given us, he began, is one of the most complex data integration projects our team has ever encountered. But I'm excited to share a breakthrough that I believe will not only meet your needs but exceed your expectations. For the next 30 minutes, I watched my brother present my work with perfect confidence and clarity. He walked through the staged migration process, explained the data validation protocols, and demonstrated the rollback capabilities. Every slide, every diagram, Every technical specification was something I had created, but Marcus presented it as naturally as if he'd developed it himself. The Morrison executives were impressed. Really impressed. This addresses our primary concern about operational continuity, Patricia Morrison said. How confident are you in the timeline for implementation? Very confident, Marcus replied. I've built in buffer time for testing and validation, but based on my analysis of your current systems, I believe we can complete the migration in phases over a 6-week period. My analysis, my timeline, my risk assessments. What about staff training? David Park asked. Our team is going to need to understand how to work with the new system. Marcus handled that question smoothly too, drawing on conversations we'd had about change management and user adoption strategies. By the end of the presentation, it was clear that Morrison Industries was ready to move forward. They signed off on the implementation plan, approved the budget, and scheduled regular check-ins to monitor progress. Outstanding work, Patricia Morrison said as she shook Marcus's hand. I have to say, when we first heard about this project timeline, we were skeptical, but this solution gives us confidence that you understand our business and can deliver results. After they left, Janet pulled Marcus aside. I want to talk about your future here, she said quietly, but not so quietly that I couldn't overhear from where I was packing up the presentation materials. The leadership team has been impressed with your work on this project. We're thinking about creating a new senior analyst position, and your name keeps coming up in discussions. A promotion, based on my work. That evening, I sat in my apartment staring at my laptop screen, trying to process what had happened. In the span of a week, my brother had stolen my biggest professional achievement and was now being considered for advancement because of it. The rational part of my brain kept telling me that Marcus was right about office politics. That's how the system worked. The person who could sell the idea, who could build confidence with leadership, who could present complex technical concepts in business terms, that person got ahead, regardless of who did the actual thinking. But the human part of my brain, the part that still believed in fairness and honesty and the value of hard work, was screaming that this was wrong. I thought about going to Janet, about showing her the timestamps on my files and the evolution of my thinking through draft documents and email chains. But what would that accomplish? Making my brother look like a liar? Destroying his career prospects? Breaking up our family? And what if she didn't believe me? What if she thought I was just jealous trying to tear down a colleague's success? Marcus had always been more persuasive than me. If it came down to his word against mine, who would she believe? I decided to wait. To see how the implementation went, to hope that Marcus would find a way to share the credit once the project was successfully completed. I was still being naive. Over the next month, as we moved into the implementation phase, Marcus became increasingly comfortable in his role as the project's technical lead. He delegated the actual work to the rest of us while he managed stakeholder communications and reported progress to leadership. To his credit, he did acknowledge my contributions in team meetings and internal communications. Alex has been instrumental in developing our migration protocols, he'd say. Or, I've been working closely with Alex to ensure our technical implementation stays on track. But to the outside world, to Janet, to the Morrison executives, to the other department heads who heard about our project's success, Marcus was the genius who had solved an impossible problem. The implementation went smoothly. My staged migration process worked exactly as designed, with zero downtime and no data loss. The new system's performance exceeded Morrison's expectations, and they began talking about expanding the project to cover additional aspects of their operations. This is career-defining work, Janet told Marcus during a team meeting in February. The kind of innovation that gets noticed at the executive level. She was right. Word of the project's success had spread throughout the company. Marcus was invited to present our methodology to other client teams. He was asked to contribute to proposals for similar projects. His star was rising rapidly. Meanwhile, I continued doing the actual technical work, solving problems as they arose during implementation, optimizing performance, and handling the complex troubleshooting that inevitably accompanies any major system migration. It was good work, satisfying work, but it was invisible work. The kind of behind-the-scenes effort that kept projects successful but didn't generate headlines or promotion opportunities. The breaking point came in March, Dataflow's CEO, Michael Harrison, decided to visit our project as part of a company-wide tour highlighting recent successes. Janet scheduled a presentation for the entire executive team, positioning it as a showcase of the kind of innovation that made Dataflow a leader in the industry. "This is big, Marcus," she told him the day before the presentation. "Harrison doesn't usually get involved in individual projects. But the Morrison success has gotten his attention. Do this right, and you could be looking at a fast track to senior management." I helped Marcus prepare, just as I had for every other presentation. We went over the technical details, discussed the business impact, and rehearsed answers to potential questions. By the time we finished, Marcus could present the solution as confidently as if he'd invented it himself. Which, from his perspective, maybe he had. The executive presentation was scheduled for 10 a.m. on a Wednesday. The entire C-suite would be there. CEO Michael Harrison, CTO Jennifer Liu, COO Robert Zhang, and CFO Amanda Torres. This was the kind of visibility that could transform a career. As the team filed into the executive conference room, I noticed Marcus seemed more nervous than usual. He was typically unflappable in these situations, but I could see him fidgeting with his presentation notes and adjusting his tie repeatedly. "You okay?" I asked as we took our seats. "Yeah, just want to make sure I nail this." The presentation started well. Marcus walked through the project background, explained Morrison's business challenges, and outlined our approach to solving their data integration problems. The executives listened with polite attention, occasionally nodding or making notes. Then Marcus reached the technical section, the part about my staged migration solution. "The key breakthrough," he said, advancing to a slide showing my data flow diagram, "was recognizing that we needed to think about this as a gradual transition rather than a hard cutover." So far, so good. This was familiar territory, the same explanation he'd given dozens of times before. But then Jennifer Liu, the CTO, raised her hand. "Can you walk me through the specific technical implementation of these data bridges? I'm particularly interested in how you handled referential integrity during the transition phases." Marcus paused. "Certainly. The data bridges they establish connections between the legacy systems and the new database structure." It was a vague answer, the kind of response that bought time while the presenter figured out how to explain something they didn't fully understand. Jennifer frowned slightly. "Right, but what's the actual mechanism? Are you using database triggers, message queues, API calls? And how do you ensure that relationships between records are maintained when they're being migrated at different times?" I saw Marcus glance at me quickly, then back at Jennifer. "We implemented a comprehensive validation system that ensures data integrity throughout the process." Another non-answer. Jennifer was clearly getting frustrated. "I'm sorry, but I need more specifics. This is the core technical innovation that made the project successful, right? Can you show me the architecture diagram for the validation system?" Marcus clicked through his slides, looking for something that would answer her question. But those diagrams didn't exist in the presentation. They were part of the technical documentation that only I had created and maintained. "I don't have that level of detail in this presentation," Marcus said finally. "But I can certainly provide it afterward." Jennifer sat back in her chair, her expression skeptical. "You designed this solution, but you don't have the technical architecture documented?" The room had gone very quiet. Michael Harrison was watching the exchange with growing interest. I could feel the tension building as Marcus struggled to provide answers he simply didn't have. "The technical documentation is quite extensive," Marcus said. "For this executive overview, I focused on the business impact and high-level approach." "I understand that," Jennifer said, "but these aren't obscure implementation details. I'm asking about fundamental design decisions. How do you handle race conditions when multiple systems are updating the same data simultaneously? What's your rollback strategy if you detect inconsistencies during migration? These are questions any systems architect should be able to answer off the top of their head." Marcus was trapped. He could explain the concepts in general terms because he'd heard me explain them to him, but he didn't understand the underlying technical details because he hadn't done the actual design work. "Perhaps," he said, looking desperately uncomfortable, Alex could provide more technical depth. He's been working closely with me on the implementation details. All eyes turned to me. For a moment, I felt paralyzed. This was my chance to reveal the truth, to show everyone who had really created the solution they were praising. But it also meant humiliating my brother in front of the company's entire leadership team. Jennifer looked at me expectantly. Alex, can you walk us through the technical architecture? I took a deep breath. Certainly. And then I began to explain my solution. The real solution, not the high-level overview that Marcus had been presenting, but the deep technical implementation that I had designed, coded, and tested. I explained how the data bridges used a combination of database triggers and message queues to capture changes in real time. I described the validation algorithms that checked referential integrity across systems during migration. I outlined the rollback mechanisms that could restore data to any previous state if inconsistencies were detected. As I spoke, I could see understanding dawn on the faces of the executives. This was the level of technical sophistication they had expected to hear. These were the kinds of details that demonstrated real expertise and innovation. Jennifer asked follow-up questions, complex technical questions that required deep knowledge of database systems, distributed computing, and data management protocols. I answered each one confidently, drawing diagrams on the whiteboard when necessary, explaining trade-offs and design decisions with the authority that comes from having actually made those decisions. This is impressive work, Jennifer said when I finished. The staged migration approach is elegant, and the validation system is more sophisticated than most enterprise implementations I've seen. How long did it take you to develop this solution? I started working on the concept in November, but the breakthrough came over the holidays. I spent about 3 weeks developing and testing the proof of concept, then another month refining the implementation. Michael Harrison leaned forward. Alex, let me ask you directly. Is this your design? The question hung in the air like a challenge. I could feel Marcus's eyes on me, could sense his panic as he realized that everything was about to unravel. Yes, I said simply. I designed the technical solution. I built the proof of concept. I created the implementation documentation. Harrison nodded slowly, then turned to Marcus. And what was your role in this development process? Marcus opened his mouth, then closed it. For once in his life, his silver tongue had abandoned him. I worked on the business requirements and client management aspects. But you presented this as your technical innovation. It wasn't a question. Marcus's face had gone pale. We worked as a team. Alex handled the technical implementation while I focused on the strategic elements. That's not what you said when you presented to our team, Jennifer observed. You took credit for the breakthrough, for the solution design. You said the key insight was yours. The silence in the room was deafening. I almost felt sorry for Marcus as I watched his carefully constructed success story collapse around him. Michael Harrison's voice was cold when he spoke again. Marcus, I think you and I need to have a private conversation after this meeting. The rest of the presentation was awkward and brief. Marcus stumbled through the remaining slides while the executives asked perfunctory questions and made polite comments. But the damage was done. Everyone in that room now understood who had actually created the solution that had saved the Morrison project. As the meeting broke up, Jennifer approached me. Alex, I'd like to schedule some time to discuss your technical work in more detail. We're always looking for innovative approaches to complex problems, and what you've developed here has broader applications. Michael Harrison nodded his agreement. Absolutely. Alex, please set up a meeting with my assistant for later this week. I want to understand more about your background and your ideas for future projects. Marcus left the conference room without looking at me. I didn't see him for the rest of the day. That evening, I got a text from him. We need to talk. We met at a coffee shop near the office, the same place where we'd celebrated his hiring 8 months earlier. Marcus looked exhausted, defeated in a way I'd never seen before. I'm sorry, he said as soon as I sat down. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I'm sorry. Are you? Are you really sorry? Or are you just sorry you got caught? He was quiet for a long moment, staring into his coffee cup. Both, I guess. I convinced myself that I was doing something strategic, something that would benefit both of us in the long run. But the truth is, I was scared. Scared of what? Of not being good enough, of being shown up by my little brother. He looked up at me, and I could see something raw and vulnerable in his expression. You've always been smarter than me, Alex. More focused, more dedicated, more talented. Growing up, everyone expected me to be the successful one because I was older, because I could charm people. But deep down, I always knew you were the one who would actually achieve something meaningful. It was the most honest thing he'd ever said to me. So you decided to steal my achievements instead of developing your own? I told myself it was temporary. That once I established myself, once I had some credibility in the company, I'd make sure you got recognition too. But every time I got praised for your work, it felt so good that I couldn't bring myself to correct the record. Do you understand how that felt for me? Watching you get promoted based on my ideas? Sitting in meetings while you explained my solutions to executives? Marcus nodded, his eyes wet. I can't imagine how much I hurt you, how much I betrayed your trust. So what happens now? I don't know. Harrison wants to meet with me tomorrow morning. I assume it's not going to be a pleasant conversation. He was right. The next day, Marcus was called into a closed-door meeting with Michael Harrison and the head of HR. I don't know exactly what was said, but the outcome was clear. Marcus was placed on probation and removed from any leadership roles on client projects. He would continue working at Dataflow, but his career advancement had been effectively frozen. Meanwhile, my phone started ringing. Jennifer Liu wanted to discuss applying my migration methodology to other client projects. Michael Harrison invited me to present my ideas to the company's technical advisory board. Janet apologized profusely for missing the real source of the Morrison innovation and recommended me for immediate promotion to senior analyst. Within 2 months, I had been elevated to the same level Marcus had been hoping to reach, with a significant salary increase and responsibility for leading technical innovation across multiple client accounts. The Morrison project was completed successfully, exceeding all performance targets and leading to a contract expansion worth over $2 million. Patricia Morrison personally thanked me during the final presentation, saying that my technical solution had transformed their business operations beyond their expectations. Marcus and I still work at the same company. We're cordial but distant, like colleagues who happen to share a last name rather than brothers who grew up together. He's focused on rebuilding his reputation through honest work, taking on smaller projects where he can contribute without overstating his role. Sometimes I catch him looking at me across the office, and I wonder what he's thinking. Whether he regrets what he did, or whether he just regrets getting caught. Whether he's learned something about the difference between borrowed success and earned achievement. I'd like to say that our relationship has healed, that we've found our way back to being brothers. But trust, once broken, is difficult to rebuild. Maybe someday we'll get there. Maybe someday I'll be able to forget the feeling of watching him steal my work and present it as his own. But I've learned something valuable from this experience. The truth has a way of surfacing, especially in technical fields where competence can't be faked indefinitely. You can present someone else's ideas convincingly for a while, but eventually you'll be asked questions that only the real creator can answer. Real expertise runs deep. It's built through hundreds of hours of problem solving, through failures and breakthroughs, through the kind of detailed understanding that comes only from doing the actual work. You can't fake that depth of knowledge when it matters most. Marcus learned that lesson the hard way. He discovered that borrowed success is inherently unstable, that recognition based on deception will eventually crumble when subjected to scrutiny. As for me, I learned to value my own contributions more highly, to speak up when credit is being misappropriated, and to trust that good work will ultimately be recognized by people who understand its value. The morning after the executive presentation, when everything had been revealed, Jennifer Liu pulled me aside and said something I'll never forget. The difference between innovation and imitation is that innovation can defend itself under questioning. What you created yesterday wasn't just a technical solution. It was a demonstration of genuine expertise. She was right. The work spoke for itself, as good work always does. It just took the right questions from the right person at the right moment for the truth to emerge. Marcus had always been the better talker, the more charismatic presenter, the one who could sell ice to Eskimos. But when it came down to substance, to actual knowledge and capability, there was no substitute for having done the real work. That's a lesson worth remembering, whether you're the one doing the work or the one tempted to take credit for it. In the end, authentic achievement is the only kind that lasts, and the only kind worth having. The rest is just performance, and eventually every performance comes to an end.